Welcome, everyone, to the Transition Bridge podcast. This is Debbie Ronka, your host. And this is the podcast where we come together each week to hear and talk about the variety of transitions that we can experience in our life. Well, our life is just a story of transitions, isn't it? And one of the challenging transitions that we can experience is when we find ourselves suddenly unemployed. We find ourselves searching and trying to secure another job in the marketplace. And we send out our resumes and we're hoping for that interview and maybe even have some anxiety about how that interview will actually happen and the outcome that it will have for us. Well, in order to help us through this transition, I have invited my expert guest, Kurt Thompson, who is a professional interview coach. And I love his quote that says, "The resume may get you the interview, but it's the interview that gets you the job." Now, since 2003, Kurt has been a professional interview coach, providing professional interview coaching services with individual coaching, workshops, and seminars, and along with his published interview workbook, which is called Start Acing Interviews Now. He's worked with numerous clients and has helped clients on all different levels, helping them with their interview skills and their strategies, and has worked with clients located in the US, Canada, and Europe. And Kurt would share himself that he is very passionate about interviewing and helping his clients achieve their professional and their career goals. Well, welcome, Kurt, to the Transition Bridge podcast. It's great to have you here with us today.
Yeah, thank you. That's quite an introduction. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, truly, you are one of those people that I think a lot of people are looking for, because in the climate that we're living today, people are either out of work or they've lost their jobs unexpectedly and really trying to figure out how to navigate that transition into getting back into the marketplace. So I'm really thrilled that you are here because I know you have so much expertise to share with us today. I understand that it's for over 20 years you've been a hiring manager and you've interviewed and hired positions on all different levels, which gives you that unique experience and insight to really know what an interviewer is looking for when a candidate comes seeking employment.
Yeah, it's not only that, it's you're right about people who are in transition. It's people who are fearful of being in transition because they hear about it all the time. So people are worried it's going to happen to them. So even if they're not in a career search, they worry, will they be? Especially big companies that lay off indiscriminately, even though the labor market is tight, but still it's happening where companies shed people and all of a sudden there they are out of work. So even if they're not in that situation, we're fearful that it could happen. Because it happens all the time.
That's a good perspective to have because it's almost like being prepared in case of, instead of waiting for that potential thing to happen. That's actually a good way to look at that. Always be prepared. Always be prepared with your resume and for the interview. So what drew you to do this? Besides having all your expertise, what just created this passion to start helping other people in the interview process?
I'll give you my quick story. Over 20 years ago, I decided to do some volunteer work at our church, and I came across the employment ministry. And there were other volunteers that did like resume workshops or career search workshops. Well, like as you indicated, I was a hiring manager. So I thought to myself, I would have some perspective on helping people what to expect in an interview, what the manager is looking for. So I put together a workshop and it became very popular. In fact, I remember one time so many people showed up, we had needed to find a bigger room. And also what started happening, people started asking me if they could hire me for individual coaching. And so I started to take clients on. And like you indicated, more than 20 years later, here I am, worked with clients across the country, Canada, Europe, all levels, entry level, out of college, C-level, public sector, government, nonprofit. It's actually pretty rewarding. I published my book, as you indicated, but the most rewarding aspect of this is when I'll get the feedback from the person, or maybe it's the parent of a recent college grad, of how I've helped them get a job. It's impacted the quality of their family's life. They're able to support their family, have their recent graduate launch their career. So yeah, it's very satisfying to get that feedback at the end when you know you have that kind of impact on on their life.
Yeah, so satisfying and fulfilling, knowing that you are really helping people take that next step. And that's awesome. I applaud that. So I'm going to go back to your quote, which I
Sure.
absolutely love. The resume may get you the interview, but it's the interview that gets the job. So tell us,
Mhm.
Kurt, why does the interview hold so much weight in securing a new job position?
Well, a couple things. I mean, I'll take that one step further. The resume gets you the interview, and then the interview gets you the job. Actually, one step further, once we're inside the interview, the job doesn't always go to the most qualified candidate. It generally many times goes to the person who's the best interviewer. So why is the interview so important? They're hard to come by. You touched on it. I was talking to a hiring manager recently. They had recently posted an unpaid internship. They received 600 applications in 3 days.
My,
They only get to talk to a handful of people. I think they decided on 12. So that just shows the volume of applicants are out there, the noise. So once we get an interview, we got to treat that like a precious commodity. So once we have that interview, we got to really focus. They don't come that often. They're hard to come by. So we really need to treat them
mm,
very really importantly, because that, like you mentioned, the interview will get you the job. It's also, but when they're interview, what also makes it important too, it's really an opportunity to showcase who you are as an individual, what you bring to the organization. If you're lucky enough to get an interview, they probably think you have the technical skills. They wouldn't have invited you in. It's really, now it's about what you bring to the organization, the cultural fit, what is your story. That even like that thought should help maybe people think about their strategy when they do get an interview. But interviews are hard to come by. We need to really treat them like they're a precious commodity.
like the prize. It's the brass
Yes.
ring.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good way to add the value to actually getting that interview. So, and I know you've been working with people for years.
Mhm.
What have you found that people have who have been doing interviews before they work with you? What has been missing
Sure.
in their own way of approaching an interview?
I would say two things. I think, and I'm gonna be a little biased because I'm an interview coach, right? So I think a lot of people put a lot of time and energy into their resume and spend good money to do so, and they'll do revision after revision, kind of debate this word versus that word. And don't get me wrong, the resume is very important. It's the starting point, but I don't think enough attention is put to the interview itself. For reasons we just talked about, the interview will get you the job. Now, some people will kind of go it alone. They have the wherewithal to like start thinking about their answers or write. A lot of people will write them out. The issue with that is how we think and how we write is not how we speak. They're different forms of communication. And you're not going to
Okay.
be the interview, if it's a test, it's not a written test, it's an oral exam and you're talking to somebody. Well, some people will actually practice out loud, or maybe they'll even record their answers into their iPhone, etc. We're getting closer, but that's still not what an interview is. An interview is talking to somebody back and forth. And so I think that going it alone is not quite getting there. This is where I think what a coach can bring to the table, as it were. I'm going to talk to this podcast that it's called How to Be Awesome at Your Job. It's Pete McKitis is the coach, and he had a speaker on recently. Scott Young was that person's name, and he articulated a little more clearly how I help people out getting prepared for interviews. It's kind of a 3-step process, and I'll explain in a minute. Show, tell, perform, practice, reflect, feedback. Okay. So if you're working with somebody, let's say you're working with me. So Debbie, we're going to work on a question about problem solving. So I would say, well, Debbie, we're not role playing quite yet. Just think of an example, kind of tell me the details, and I'll jot it out. I'll say, okay, let me play that back to you. Let me tell you how I would answer that. I'll do it for you, and you'll say, okay. I'll say, Debbie, let me do that again for you. Let me just tell you how it's going to sound. I'll do it maybe 3 times. Then I'll say, okay, now it's your turn. Now you'll practice it and you'll perform it. Then I'll give you some feedback and some reflection moment of how we can improve that. So if you go it alone, there's nobody telling you or showing you how to do it. And there's nobody on the back end to give you feedback and guidance. You're just simply performing it without the other 2 components. So that
Mm-hmm.
answers your question of where I think people fall short, and also why a coach can help get you better, faster, sooner.
Well, it gives some absolute depth to your interview communication. So
Hmm.
what I believe I'm hearing you saying is the way you communicate that answer really will resonate with the person who's interviewing you, and they'll see you in a different way based on the way that you answer.
Oh, definitely. I think that's
Yeah.
by having that feedback, it can help craft the
Mhm.
message. Like, I
Mhm.
don't think practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice does.
Mm.
So I think by having a coach, it helps you get better, more perfect practice. I think you and I are on the same page. We both believe everybody can use a coach. I'm a big baseball fan. Little league baseball players have coaches, so do professional baseball players. Because the one thing about interviewing, it is a skill, and like any skill, you can get better at that. With good guidance, i.e., coaching, you can get better faster. And that's where I think where people who go it alone, I give them credit, but I think maybe where they're falling a little bit short. And again, a personal bias, maybe a little too much emphasis on the resume, but not enough emphasis on the interview itself.
Yeah, so the moral of the story is don't do it alone. Work with a coach.
Or okay, let's say, or at least somebody else. Maybe you have a family member or friend you don't want to, don't
Sure.
want to, or can't invest the money or time, but at least you're interacting with somebody else, and they can at least give you feedback and some perspective as well. That's because interviewing, you're not talking to yourself. You're talking to a person, right? It's a two-way communication. So to best replicate that, try to create an environment where you're talking to somebody else. If it's not a coach, family member, friends, trusted advisor, etc., mentor.
I think that's awesome. Well, I loved your book,
Thank you.
you know, and I really enjoyed going through it. There was a lot in there. It's so much value, so I want to highly recommend everyone reach out to you, to work with you and to also get access to your workbook because I think it really takes you through the process. So, well, so then how do you help someone anticipate the correct questions to
Sure.
prepare?
The key to anticipating the questions to answer, well, there's a lot of information, but where I start is the job description. So the job description is basically the prospective employer telling you what they're looking for in terms of experience, background, skill set. So if I look at something that's on a job description, i.e., a requirement of the employer, I think it's fair game that they're going to ask about that. So once I look at that job description in great detail, I almost put myself in the role of the employer. If these are important attributes, experiences, then I maybe should ask a question about that. So I use the terminology. I reverse engineer the job description. So I look at what they're asking for from the candidate. Then I go, okay, if I'm the interviewer, what kind of question would I ask about that? Then I'll start compiling a list of questions. There are some other, I mean, the internet has a lot of resources. There's a website I like called Workable. And
Mhm.
in there are potential interview questions that a candidate can look at by industry, skill set, technical interviews, et cetera. So there's a lot of interview guides on a website called workable.com. But the job description is the key. Looking at that job description and really understanding what is this prospective employer asking of their candidate and build questions off their requirements. They're
I know
basically they're signaling to you what they want. They're signaling to you what they want to talk about by that job description.
That's good advice. And I know sometimes one of the questions that someone could potentially be asked is, tell me about yourself. So why is this question so
Yeah,
important and really why is it so difficult to answer?
yeah, a couple of things. Well, let's talk about the psychology of interviewing. So studies have shown the interviewer, the person that works for the company, studies have shown that that individual makes up their mind about the candidate in like the first 10 minutes or so, and then uses the remaining time to kind of validate or justify that initial impression. It's really how the brain works, so the brain can be efficient, not have to put all that brain power into the full call. Okay, so hold that thought for a second. The tell me about yourself is almost always the first question, almost all the time. So we know that the first 10 minutes are important. We know that that question is coming, so we really need to be good in that first. When we put those two concepts together, we need to be really good in that first 10 minutes. Now, why is the tell me about yourself so hard? Well, it's not even a question. It's actually more of a command, first off, but
Mhm.
it's so wide open, right? Like, where do you start? Where do you go? How do you end? So I've had a lot of seasoned professionals struggle with that. I can do a kind of a quasi role play for you how I help my clients build that if they don't know where to start. And before I do that, this is not the way to answer that question. This is a way to answer it.
Okay.
The one thing about interviewing, it's not a science. It is an art. Are there better ways? Yes, but are there like exact ways versus not so much? But for somebody that doesn't really know what to do, well, first I'll make a couple other comments too. I guess here's what not to do. We don't need to go line by line through the resume. Again, we have 10 minutes to really capture their attention. They already have your resume. So I would contend we're kind of wasting opportunity if you're just reciting information that they already have.
Good point.
Also, a lot of people will start talking about, well, okay, here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for my next thing. I want this. It's kind of I. Should be a little bit what you could do for the person you're talking to. So I'm going to make up a role play in my head, and then I'll break it down at the end here. So I'm going to be here we go. I'm going to imagine I'm a finance manager. Tell me about yourself, Kurt. Sure. Well, I'm a professional finance and accounting manager. I've always been really good with numbers. Even as a little boy, I could calculate baseball averages in my head and do statistics in my head. It just came naturally. So that just pulled me into the field of finance. You can see from my resume that I have 7 years of professional experience. I do believe the skills I've developed thus far, well, one, I have a high attention to detail. I'm very organized. Obviously, it's important in this business. But I love collaboration. I love being part of a team. I'm comfortable working independently, but I really thrive in being a part of a team. And I consider myself like a lifelong learner, always looking for a next challenge, always looking how I can improve myself. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Unless you have any other questions, just want to say I'm really looking forward to our meeting today. So that's a formula I just used. You might thought, how did he do that so quickly? I have a headline. I'm a professional, whatever you are. Here's my backstory. I gave this little story about being able to calculate baseball averages as a kid. That's not on my resume. That kind of gives a little color commentary. Maybe I've always I'm a professional editor. I can remember always loving books as a child. But I'm an entrepreneur. It's in my family. My dad owned, my parents owned the business. So what's their backstory? Again, I couldn't see that on the resume. It's more like color commentary. Then I start talking about what I can do for you. Here are 3 skill sets I bring to an organization versus what you can do for me. What I also find too, a lot of people, they just simply stop. They kind of stop. They don't know, they weren't quite sure how to begin, and they weren't sure to go, and they run out of steam, and they just stop. And then the person you're talking to is like, "Oh, I guess you're done." And there's that kind of momentary awkwardness. We don't want any of that in the first 10 minutes because those 10 minutes are important. So that's one way to do it. A headline, a little backstory. What are your key strengths? And just a little wrap up at the end. That's one way.
No, I really enjoyed that. And it kind of gave like a human side of you instead of just, what you're capable of doing, but then also what you're willing to do to work with others, even though you're great at working by yourself. And you also added how you can collaborate and deposit into this company. Yeah, so I see that as an awesome answer. I think the struggle too would be with people, and how do you help them? People who don't like to talk about themselves at all. They're better talking about others than
Yes.
themselves. And how do you build their confidence in what it is that they get to share?
Well, I want to come back to one thing you said about, I think you said the human context. I call it the color commentary. I will tell people I'm not imagining holding up a resume. I'll say this resume is a black and white depiction of who you are, that you now have the ability to bring that 3-dimensional, add color commentary. You said it a little bit differently, but that's exactly what we're trying to do, is add some depth to the black and white 2-dimensional view of the resume. Your next question about, that you're right about that. People were taught to be, a team player and not want to hog the spotlight and give credit where credit is due. Yes, the person you're talking to, the interviewer, though, they do want to know what you bring to the table. And it's okay to use I did this and I did this in right context. And sure, some people may cross the line and come across as egotistical. I don't see that very often. I was working with a client last night. I said, trust me, you are a long ways away from being egotistical. We can use I a little bit more. Now, somebody will say to me, well, Kurt, it was a team project, right? There were other people on the team. Easy enough. Acknowledge that. Say, well, it was a team project, and as part of that team, my responsibility was this, and then talk about what you brought to the team. Just simply acknowledge it's a team project, but then talk about what you bring to the table. But you're right about that. I do need to reinforce with the candidates that the person you're talking to, they do want to hear what you bring to the table. It's okay to use I. Most people don't use it enough, right? Every now and then I'll pull people back, but that's the exception, not the norm. So I think it's maybe just helping somebody be comfortable. That's like, again, setting expectations. That's what the interviewer wants to hear. So when they understand that, maybe it makes it more comfortable to do so. But yeah, we're programmed to give credit where credit is due and be humble. That's how we're brought up, right? So, which is fine.
Yeah, no, I like that. You're actually giving them permission in a
There you
way
go. Mm-hmm.
to actually speak about themselves, that it's a good thing. So I know one thing you were mentioning to me earlier was behavior-based interviewing.
Yeah.
So can you share with the audience exactly what is it and how do you recognize those type of questions while you're in an interview process?
Sure. So behavior-based interviewing is the most common type of interviews that employers conduct. And the theory behind that is that past performance is an indication of future outcome. So in other words, the person you're talking to, they want to hear examples or stories from your past, not hypothetical what you do in the future. The good news, it's really easy to identify those kind of questions. It starts almost always like this. Hey, Debbie, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult client. Debbie, can you tell me about a time where you had to manage competing deadlines? Debbie, can you tell me about a time you used excellent problem solving skills? Tell me about. An alternative way would be, can you describe a situation when, but basically that's the same thing. So it's really easy to identify those questions. When you hear that, tell me about a time, whatever follows, it should be like a little bell going up here that, okay, now there is a proper way to answer those questions. A lot of clients do come to me, they understand, they've heard of behavior-based interviewing. If you were to do like an internet search, you would come up with the STAR method. And the STAR method is simply an acronym. I've taken it one step further. I call it the START method. So I kind of tease my clients. I give you an extra letter. You have one letter up on your competition. But either way, it's a simple formula, and I'll break it down for you. So it's really how to tell a story in a succinct, concise way that's easy to understand in an interview format. So the ST is kind of a 1-2 combo of the acronym. It's simply the situation and the task at hand. As a rule of thumb, when we're talking about the situation, just simply reference where on the resume are we talking about? Are we talking about a job? Was it a volunteer event? Was it a school project? The T is the task at hand. What is the problem to be solved? What is the initiative? What was the class project? It's really just setting up the story. The A is talking about what happened. As a rule of thumb, like, I want to talk about 3 to 5 key steps of what happened. Now, some of my clients will say, well, Kurt, it was a year-long project. There were so many moving parts. We can get to 3 or 5, trust me, and we will. What I found is that people are pretty good about getting that far on their own, like setting up the story and kind of talking about what happened. But really, the key to the story is giving a nice ending. The result, what happened? My analogy is, what if you were reading a book and you couldn't read the last 30 pages? What if you went to a movie, you couldn't watch the last 30 minutes? Not very fulfilling, right? There's like an unsatisfied ending there. The good news, if we're really being strategic about preparation for interviews, we get to kind of choose the stories that we can choose stories that have a happy ending. So we can pick stories that have a positive outcome. So when we're talking about the result, one of 2 things. We want to talk about a result that can be quantified if possible, measured. Now, I have a sales background. It's pretty easy for me. I could say something like, and the result of that sales initiative, revenue went up by $100,000. Everybody understands what that means. Not everything can be quantified like that. So for example, let's say, and as a result of really quickly resolving that customer's concern, they were so satisfied they sent an email to my manager. So they didn't send an A or a B, but there was some kind of validation that something ended well. So if you can kind of support the result, okay, that's a lot of people will have, here's the situation task, here's the action, here's the result. The extra letter that I bring to the table and help my clients with is the takeaway. It's really the moral of the story. And people remember the moral of the story, right? They don't remember the story. That's why it's called the moral of the story. We remember the moral of the story. But really what it is, it's an opportunity to tell the person you're talking about, not only do I have the experience that you're looking for, but I learned from that. I continued to grow. I progressed. So the key takeaway, I'm making this up in my head. So really what I took away from that situation was communication. really setting expectations at the front end so all the team members knew exactly what was expected of them. And that's what really made that project successful. It's not really telling the story, it's just a look back, a key moment, something I learned, the takeaway, the moral of the story. So when I work with my clients, that's what we do. We identify questions like we talked about the job description. We start, it's really storytelling. It's really what it is. It's actually more than interviewing. It's effective storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
So we know what stories we want to tell. Okay, let's, in our mind, let's think of some examples. Let's put it into that start format. Let's practice so it comes up conversational. It's not meant to be like robotic or scripted. It's just a formula. It's a roadmap. It's not a script. Not a script. It's just like touch points. But that's like when somebody says, "Tell me about a time when," they want to hear the situation, task, action, result. That's what they want. So you're basically speaking their language, and that's.
Yeah, that's great preparation. And I love the concept of storytelling because I think when you put it in that parameter, it becomes more of coming from the heart, coming from your soul, just telling a story versus feeling like you have to be so black and white in your answers. Like to me, the story adds the color to your black and white resume.
Well, you're right about that. In fact, I really try to teach my clients, don't get hung up on the words. Don't try to memorize this. Just more internalize it that you have. I don't know. We're not going to wing it. It's basically have an idea what you're going to say. In fact, I kind of want you to say it a little bit different each time. So it's personal. It's not meant to be scripted. So the terminology I will use is not memorize it. It's internalize it. An example, I'm also a movie fan. And I think we all know that when we're watching a movie that those actors, they're coming off a script, right? But they have practiced it to the level and they've added their own personality to it that there's a suspension of disbelief and it makes a very effective story being told. That's kind of what we're trying to do here in the interview. But without having a formula, it's like you can't start. So you have to have a template, a roadmap, guidelines, as it were. But I'll come back to it. The person that's asking that, tell me about a time when, they are trained to listen to stories in a certain way. They are conditioned to hear that start method. So you are speaking their language. So if you're speaking their language, you're more likely to be understood, right?
That's what I love about what you do because you understand how the interviewer hears and what the interviewer is looking for. And you're literally training and coaching your clients to meet that criteria with their answers. And it can't help but benefit them because you're developing a connection. You're helping the candidate get that connection with the interviewer.
You're speaking their language, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're speaking, then they're higher degree of being understood. Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. Try to speak their language,
Let me ask you about one of the big transitions in life that happens. You've been in your career a very long time, and suddenly, sometimes people in their 60s are let go. People's careers are cut short. And so when you have someone like in a senior level management that comes to you for coaching, what are some of the fears or insecurities that they may have trying to get back in the marketplace after being in there for so many years?
Yeah, that can be challenging. Their lives are more complicated. They may have more complicated financial situations. At that point, they're so far in their career, a lot of us identify who we are by what we do. Like go to a cocktail party. What's the opening statement? So what do you do for a living, right? It was our identity. So there's a lot of things going on there. Now we're trying to we're a director level, a senior VP, and the further up we go in the organization, there are less opportunities there are. We're fearful of stepping backwards. And then we need to talk about that concept of age discrimination, which unfortunately I do believe it exists to a certain degree. It does need to be dealt with. Where even if it doesn't exist, if somebody's thinking about it, it does exist in somebody's mind. So whether it's valid or not, but we do think about that. It's one of the biggest concerns I hear from more seasoned professionals. Here's a resource outside of what I do, and I'll talk about what I can do. There's a newsletter called Nifty 50s. It's NIFTY 50s, nifty50s.com. It's a newsletter that comes out twice a week. It's specifically for people over 50, obviously, and it's like career advice and dealing with career transitions at 50 or above. What I can do, a lot of it's like what the story, back to the stories you tell. That's where I come into play. Like, unfortunately, there's like, it sounds innocent enough, like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Unfortunately, it really perpetuates stereotypes that people have out there, that older people can't learn new ideas. So I would coach my clients to be ready to talk about that. They embrace change, adaptability, flexibility, showcase skills that they've learned, lifelong learner, all these kind of concepts, and being ready to articulate and express stories about that. So we'll definitely take time to talk about stories that fall into those categories. But yeah, it's a little more challenging, and unfortunately, I think people do need to reconcile that age discrimination may be out there to some extent.
Now let's go on the flip side. I
Okay.
understand that you also work with kids coming out of college, and that's the
I
other
do.
extreme. Now they're going in for their first job. Do you prepare them any differently?
Yeah, for sure. They're like a blank slate. They
Mm,
they they don't know what they don't know. Somebody who's been a seasoned, they either know what they don't know, or actually they know what they know. They know it's gonna be hard, but out of college, they don't know what they don't know. I think college, I'm a college grad, I assume you are as well. College is a wonderful experience. It's but I don't think they do as good a job as setting up these graduates for interviewing. To me, the college experience is, the college is set about what can the college do for the student. Now it's a shift. It's what can this potential new employee do for the company. It's actually a kind of a 180 shift degree right there. Colleges will have like career development resources, but they're really understaffed. They don't have a big budget. So these young people, they just simply don't know. They don't know. So it's like, it's really kind of starting from a blank slate. But what I like about working with, but they're so eager,
yeah.
they're coming out of an environment of learning. They're used to being following directions from their college instructors. Their college instructors tell them to do something, and they do it. So they're kind of fun to coach because they are a blank slate. But yeah, they just don't know what they don't know. They have to like take it right down to the very basics and just start as if we have a blank slate. But they're all fun to work with. So that's where as I mentioned, I do believe interviewing is a skill, and regardless of where you're at, whether you're entry level, C level, any skill can be improved upon, and it can be improved faster with proper guidance, i.e. coaching.
That's great. Now, how about when you are the candidate, you're going in for the interview?
Mhm.
Are there specific questions that you should be prepared for to ask the one who's interviewing you?
Yeah, that's a good topic as well. Studies have shown the top two pet peeves of the interviewer are, one, the person they're talking to just hasn't done enough research about the company, but number two, they don't ask enough good questions. So we're going to remedy that. Here are two questions are my fallback first questions to ask out of the gate. So I'm going to quasi role play with you, Debbie. So let's say generally the questions come at the end of the interview. So toward the tail end, you're going to say, okay, Kurt, those are my questions. What questions do you have for me? So I would do something like this. I would say, well, thank you. I did prepare some questions in advance. Some you've already kind of addressed during our conversation, but Debbie, I'd love to hear your story. I saw your LinkedIn profile. I've seen you about the company about 8 years. What brought you to this company, and what do you enjoy most about working here? You're trying to make a connection with the person you're talking to. There's a saying that people buy from who they like and trust. And I'm sorry, you are selling something. You're selling the idea that you would be the best candidate to fill their open position. So how to get people to like and trust you? Will show a genuine interest in them. So now ask that question with sincerity. Don't fake it. Show genuine interest in the person you're talking to. Let's say for whatever reason you couldn't find their LinkedIn profile, or I didn't know who I was going to meet with today. I can modify that question really easy. So Debbie, I'd love to hear your story. How did you end up working for the company? And what do you enjoy most about working here? But again, I'm trying to understand, like, with sincerity. I really do. I'm really kind of curious. Of all the places you could work, why do you work here, and why do you keep coming back to work? That's my first question. The second question I like to ask is, you might get one or two questions about the person you're talking to. I'd like to ask a question about the position. So a question I like to ask would be something like this. So, Debbie assumed I were fortunate enough to be asked to join the company. What would be the top 3 priorities you'd like me to accomplish in, let's say, the first 30, 60, 90 days? Just trying to understand what's important to you. What are your priorities? What are you trying to get done? That may stimulate some conversation. The third one I'd like to ask, this is where we have to do a little research. And there's actually a lot of things going on here with this next question. Researching the company, it's important, if at all possible, to understand what the mission, vision is of that organization. Most companies have one. It's usually pretty readily available on company's website. And if it's a bigger company, companies spend a lot of money on developing their mission statement, cascading and promoting it inside the company. So I'm going to quasi role play with you. So I've done my research. I saw your mission statement. So imagine I'm going to role play with you. So, Debbie, I have another question. I saw your mission statement. I saw that your company's really invested in the community. That's a value that aligns with me. In fact, you see from my resume, I volunteer a lot. Perhaps you could tell me a little bit more about how your company does connect with the community. A couple of things are going on there. One, I've shown you I've done my research, right? I'm telling you, I saw your mission statement, and I know that's important to you. Not only that, I picked one out that aligns with me. I'm trying to show that perhaps there's a value alignment here. Then I have a question to ask of you. Like, I put it into a question format. Can you tell me a bit more about that? But it's more about that I showed you I did my research, and I'm trying to, with genuine sincerity, show you that I have a connection. Understanding a company's mission statement is very important. And then at the end, so generally the question answering, asking is at the end. So I'm going to role play again as if I were you. We're probably getting toward the tail end of our conversation. Debbie, I don't have any more questions. I just want to say I really appreciate your time today. I'm really excited about this opportunity. I think I could be a great fit for the organization. Maybe you can just tell me the next step. So versus just saying, no more questions and kind of dropping the mic, as it were, and letting the conversation go on. Start strong with that good tell me about yourself. Finish on a high note. Let them know you're excited. Let them know you're enthusiastic. It's okay to ask what the next step is. You're not putting them on the spot. But before you just say no more questions, one more time to show your level of excitement. I'll actually make my clients a role play that at the end. It's maybe a little silly, but I'll actually have them. Debbie, I want you to do that for me. I know it's a little silly, but I'm going to have you do that for me. I want you to get comfortable saying that out loud. And they'll kind of chuckle, then they'll do it.
That's right. Yeah. So speaking of, tell us, Kurt.
Sure.
Because anyone who's listening, who's you're in that position and you're trying to find that new place of employment, and maybe you feel like you're really struggling in the interview process. So I highly recommend that you reach out to Kurt. I'm going to have all his contact information in my show notes, and I know you probably would have people come to your website, to connect with you. But tell us. You've shared so much valuable information. If someone reaches out to you and wants to work with you, what can they expect when they come to work with you?
Anybody can reach out to me. There is no obligation, no cost for a consultation. In fact, anybody who just reaches out to me, I will send them a copy of my interview workbook just for taking the time to connect with me. But if somebody wanted to work with me, I do have a process. I'm kind of a process-oriented person. I do have a system in place, but really it starts with understanding like where the person I'm talking to, where are they at, where do they feel they're struggling, where are they looking to go. So I take my process, but I really look to customize that. So we're talking about people coming out of college. We're talking about C-level, right? So the process is similar, but it's customized based upon where my client is starting from. And then beyond that, I provide some tools. It's first of all, it's good old-fashioned one-on-one coaching with like let me show you, tell you how to do some things. You give it a go. Let me give you some feedback. So it's basically coaching back and forth. I do have some video tutorials I provide to my clients as well. And then what I also do too, I record portions of my sessions. So that's a widely used technique for process improvement. I'm not a golfer myself, but if you've ever taken golf lessons, the instructor will record your swing so you can see it from a third-party view to perhaps make corrections. So the recordings of portions of our sessions do two things. One, it allows my client to hear, for better or worse, what they're saying and how they sound, and they can make modifications. But where it really pays dividends is by keeping those on file, and like the night or day before the interview is to re-listen to your stories, so the stories are kind of put to the top of mind. They're refreshed as well. So that's why I record portions of the stories as well. So it's really good old-fashioned one-on-one coaching, supplementing that with video tutorials, and then recording portions of the sessions for the purposes I just shared with you.
Well, that's fascinating. And I think I totally agree with you. We should never go this alone. There's so much value in coaching. I'm a coach. I coach people through the transitions in life. You're coaching to help people get that dream job that they're looking for, or to get back into the marketplace to feel fulfilled and satisfied in their career. Both are so valuable. And I think in life, when we go alone, the process is slower. We make a lot of mistakes. It's better to come alongside someone like yourself and learn how to do it well, and go into an interview with confidence and just with valuable input that you can bring to that interview process. So
can I share with you? You actually said something very important. Can I share with you one last little story?
Oh, absolutely.
Actually, I can tell, it's actually a friend of mine I worked with about 10, 15 years ago. He was getting ready to interview with a big financial institution, and we spent hours identifying the questions to work on and the answers to share and all that. And when the big day came, I said, when you're driving home, I'm vested. I want to hear how this going. Give me a call when you're driving home. And he called me as soon as he set in his car, hands free, of course. He called me up. I said, okay, well, how did we do? He said, oh, it went well. It went well. I nailed it. I said, oh, that's awesome. Like, what questions that we prepare for did they ask you? They were able to share your stories. He said, none of them. Like, I was crestfallen. Like, none of them. Like, what do you mean it went well? He says, you don't understand, Kurt. I was so confident. That's actually what I do for people. It's about being confident. It's a whole different attitude, because you said it, and that's exactly, thank you for bringing that up. That's exactly, at the end of the day, what I really believe I do is help people be confident. And when they're confident, that's a whole different ball game. So I didn't mean to jump in on like that, but you said something I had to piggyback on. It's about confidence. Yep.
I'm so glad you did, because golly, when we have the confidence, we're able to take those action steps and
Yes.
leave something knowing that you did well, regardless, right? If you're confident going in. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. And I think that's what a coach gives you. It gives you confidence.
Correct.
To believe in yourself, that you have value and worth, and you are worthy of the hire. I love what you do.
Thank you.
Well, Kurt, I just want to thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah,
And
pleasure.
everyone, again, just reach out to Kurt. I know in the climate that we're in, there's a lot of people looking for jobs, and maybe you're looking for something different. Maybe you're in a current employment, but you've been really thinking about you want to make a change. Well, I believe Kurt can help you in that area as well. So again, I will have all of his information in my show notes. And I don't want anyone to be discouraged. If you are struggling right now and you are out of work, I just want you to know there is hope. There is an answer to that cry of your heart, wanting to know, who do I connect with? What do I do next? Well, you heard from the expert today. Kurt is here. He's available, and he wants to make a difference in your life. He wants to help you develop confidence and develop those interview skills so that you can go into that process knowing that you did well and that you are prepared. And that is a gift. And so again, I highly recommend that you reach out to Kurt. And I want to thank all of you, my Transition Tribe, for your faithfulness and your loyalty as you come each and every week to grow, to embrace, and to be transformed by the purpose and the power of transitions.